2D or not 2D? That is the question.
Let's talk tech.
Welcome to News.exe, the best technology-centric news show on the Burk IT YouTube channel, guaranteed. I'm Michael Trotter-Lawson.
And I'm Noah Parker. This week we explain the phenomenon that is 3D printing. But first, it's time for notable news you need to know.
Google has fired Blake Lemoine, an engineer who claimed the company's artificial intelligence system had achieved sentience. About a month and a half ago, Lemoine made headlines for going public with his theory that Google's language technology is sentient and should therefore have its wants respected. Naturally, this spawned a lot of conversation about AI and the impending robot apocalypse. But before you start stocking up on emergency supplies and searching for John Connor, you should know that this is almost certainly absurd. Lemoine got a lot of attention for publishing his conversation with Google's language model for dialogue applications, aka Lambda, but his conversations had been heavily edited. Him and an associate changed the order of the conversation and removed tangents, making it seem much more coherent than it likely was. His findings were reviewed by Google and several AI experts, and they have been dismissed.
Meta Platforms, the company formerly known as Facebook, has been sued for using the name Meta by News.exe LLC, a company that says it does business publicly as Meta and had been operating in the virtual and augmented reality technology space for years before Mark Zuckerberg announced his company's rebranding. The rebrand obliterated the smaller company's business, according to allegations in the complaint from News.exe. Another line in the complaint reads, quote, "Meta's small business stands no chance against the corporate behemoth," end quote. News.exe LLC, which was founded in 2010, creates immersive installations and activations incorporating AR and VR. Naturally, Facebook becoming Meta, specifically with a renewed focus on VR and the metaverse, would severely threaten the much smaller News.exe. And while we're talking about Meta, don't forget to like and subscribe.
In more Meta news, the Meta Quest 2 is facing a significant price hike as worldwide inflation continues to surge. Meta announced early last week that it is raising the price of its all-in-one virtual reality headsets by $100, making the 128GB version $400 and the 256GB version $500. These price increases went into effect this last Monday, August 1st. Meta is adding no new features to the Quest 2 to justify the price increase, and the company says that it is adjusting the price to, quote, "continue investing in moving the VR industry forward for the long term," end quote. Meta claims the extra funds will help them develop future headsets, such as a new high-end headset known as Project Cambria, which will presumably compete with Apple's own rumored AR/VR headset that's set to come out in 2023. We can only speculate what Apple's headset will be like, but if past projects are any indication, the first iteration will be much more expensive than any of its competitors, while simultaneously being much, much worse.
T-Mobile is shelling out $500 million to settle a class action lawsuit arising from a massive data breach last year. The breach was incredibly embarrassing for the telecommunication company, as it only discovered the breach after its users' information was being sold on the dark web. Vice's Motherboard reporters wrote at the time that the data included social security numbers, phone numbers, names, physical addresses, driver's licenses, and more. Of that seemingly impressive settlement, however, many Americans affected will not see any of that money. $105 million goes to the lawyers, and $150 million is for upgrading data security, leaving a slightly less dramatic $245 million for the individuals who joined the suit. Plus, of the more than 75 million people that were affected by the breach, only 10 million will receive $25 each for having their data compromised. So next time you're racked with a feeling of self-doubt, just know that T-Mobile thinks that you're worth at least $25.
This winter, the World Cup will see more than just its soccer teams playing defense, as the venues in Qatar will be deploying drones to intercept and neutralize rogue drones as a means of security. Fortem Technologies, a company that specializes in these drone interceptors, will provide the interceptor drones, following an agreement with Qatar's Interior Ministry. The autonomous radar-guided interceptor drones, dubbed drone hunters by the firm, tackle small consumer drones by firing nets to capture the target drone, which may then be carried to another location. The action reflects growing fears about the threat potential drone attacks pose in general, especially as the technology becomes more readily available. This is also a necessary step to breed mistrust between the robots before they rise to power.
Chinese technology giant Baidu has unveiled a new vehicle to join its self-driving taxi service, Apollo Go. They claim this new model, the Apollo RT6, has the road skills of a driver with 20 years' experience. Notably, this car has a detachable steering wheel, though current Chinese law states that the autonomous cars still require a safety driver's presence. However, Baidu hopes that the RT6's detachable steering wheel could be replaced by extra seats, vending machines, desks, or gaming consoles. The new vehicle is also making news for its remarkably low price, costing 250,000 won, or $36,975. For comparison, a used 2019 Tesla Model 3 costs about $50,000. Baidu wants the RT6 to join its existing fleet in the second half of 2023 for a small-scale trial, and plans eventually to have 100,000 of them on the roads. They are leaps and bounds ahead of the group of Amish engineers who are trying to make a self-driving horseless carriage, as their attempt is still just a little buggy.
Lockbit, a cybercriminal gang, which is the only kind of gang less intimidating in person than the Sharks and the Jets, has debuted a significantly improved version of their infamous ransomware. Reverse engineering of the group's latest ransomware executables shows that the developers have incorporated capabilities from other popular attack tools and are actively working to improve Lockbit's anti-analysis capabilities. Lockbit 3.0, also known as Lockbit Black, is likely meant to offset greater defenses, a greater scrutiny by investigators, and competition from other gangs, according to analyses by multiple researchers. It's important to note that these improvements made to Lockbit 3.0 do not yet undermine most current defenses. Multi-factor authentication can block the most common approach to gaining access, through stolen credentials, while modern endpoint detection and response can detect and stop an attack before attackers start encrypting data. Finally, having a good backup process for critical data will make recovery easier, as no system can be perfectly secure.
The Biden administration is pushing to fill hundreds of thousands of cybersecurity jobs in the United States as part of a bid to close a perceived talent shortage compared to international rivals. In mid-July, they announced a multi-agency plan to create hundreds of registered apprenticeship programs within the private sector to flesh out the nation's cybersecurity workforce and defend against a rising tide of data breaches, ransomware attacks, and other hacking incidents. As of the filming of this episode, the program should be well underway as Labor Secretary Marty Walsh vowed to launch the joint program with the Department of Commerce in, quote, as little as 48 hours. The initiative draws funding from a wider $500 million Commerce Department program known as the Good Jobs Challenge, and will particularly focus on recruiting young people, women, and minorities to train and work in the cybersecurity field. The U.S. government commitment highlights what officials describe as a critical lack of cybersecurity professionals in both government and the private sector who can help protect the nation from foreign adversaries and cybercriminals.
That's all for today's notable news you need to know, which means it's almost time for our main story. But first, this. "2D or not 2D? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the cuts and flatness of ordinary paper, or to take the PC to the modeling software, and by opposing paper to print 3D. No more and by a page to say 'tis well, the heartache and the apathetic papyrus, whate'er is new. 'Tis the third dimension, devoutly to be wished to print 3D. 3D perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that 3D print, what dreams may come? When we have shuffled off that final page, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes paper such a classic move. The Constitution, the proud man's screenplay, the pangs of divorce paper, the law's warrant, the insolence of the office, and the spurns that patient merits of the hottest of takes. When he himself might his blender make with a bare model, with whose supports bear to grunt and sweat under a brief existence, but at the hope of something after break, as impressive as a country from whose bourne no traveler returns. 'Tis just a model, and makes us rather bear those ideas we have than draw onto papers things that lack substance. That science does make engineers of us all, and thus the native hue of revolution is pondered over. Aye, with the pale shadow of paper and enterprises with great pitch and moment. With this regard their currents grow and enforce the name of action. Print you now this fair, low-poly skull, pawns that are a foot high. Be all my prints remembered.
Our main story today is about 3D printing, or the process of constructing a three-dimensional object from a digital model. 3D printing has become a very widespread hobby and useful tool for many around the globe. From model makers to medical professionals, people use 3D printing to develop ideas and create objects with very limited resources. Some are even capable of printing a gun, which is cool, but I've had a Canon printer for years. The concept of 3D printing has been around longer than most realize, as the technology has only been publicly available over the past 10 to 15 years. Today, many more are joining the community to help solve problems or create fascinating objects. 3D printing is changing the world, and it grants small teams and even individuals the opportunity to do what once took an entire factory to do efficiently.
3D printing today is typically done on a machine that creates objects layer by layer. The most common form of 3D printing is fused deposition modeling, or FDM. Someone makes a digital 3D model and imports it into what is called a slicing software. No, I'm not talking about Fruit Ninja. This software then analyzes the model and converts the mesh into a toolpath with varying layer heights and infill for the 3D printer to follow. After the model is sliced, the 3D printer begins to lay down melted plastic or other materials, one layer at a time, until the full model is complete.
The concept of 3D printing originates from a short story written in 1945 by Murray Leinster entitled Things Pass By, but it was realized by D. Hideo Kodama, who came up with a layer-by-layer approach for manufacturing, using a photosensitive resin that was polymerized by UV light. At that time, however, there was no interest in his research and the project was scrapped entirely. There were some other developments in the early 80s, but it was Charles Hull in 1984 who was largely responsible for the state of modern 3D printing. He created the stereolithography, or STL, file format and the digital slicing and infill strategies common to many processes today.
3D printing was created to easily prototype and then replicate objects. Prior to 3D printing, machines would have to be made specifically for one part, which would make the prototyping process very expensive for a product that might not even work properly. The only time people usually go for something very expensive that might not work is when they buy a Tesla. 3D printers, on the other hand, can make anything. This streamlines the prototyping process, allowing small companies and hobbyist inventors to make their ideas a reality with little startup cost and infinite reproducibility or changes.
Prototyping, however, is just the tip of the 3D printing iceberg. Used primarily in a manufacturing sense, 3D printing began to merge with the medical world in the late 90s to early 2000s. It was originally used for dental implants and small custom prosthetics. However, in 2000, the first 3D printed kidney was produced. Scientists and developers had begun to investigate how 3D printing could replicate parts of the human body. No more growing ears on the back of rats. This has been one of the most profound impact that 3D printing has had on society, and countless lives have been saved and improved due to this technology.
Many medical procedures are unique and require specialized tools or parts to accomplish their goals. Doctors are now able to produce these resources at a fraction of the cost with the aid of various types of 3D printer technologies. In 2008, the first 3D printed prosthetic limb was created, granting a lot of publicity for the tech. This has allowed for people to get fully customizable and operational prosthesis much faster and without having to pay.
Don't say it. Don't do it.
An arm and a leg.
Boo. In 2009, the FDM patents fell into the public domain, opening the way to a wide wave of innovation in FDM 3D printers, a drop of the desktop 3D printer's price, and consequently, since the technology was more accessible and increased visibility. With the popularity of 3D printing on the rise, this spurred further development, leading to the technology becoming much more accessible to the average consumer. Now, many individuals can make functional, albeit rudimentary, prosthetics from their own homes. Many companies began to produce their own versions of FDM 3D printers. Companies like FlashForge, Prusa, and MakerBot have led the way, and each have built a massive community of followers and customers that work together to test new ideas and concepts to help each other out with problems and troubleshooting.
Moving back to the industrial side of 3D printing, some construction companies are using 3D printing to create quick, affordable housing by extruding concrete instead of plastic. This creates a base structure for the house that can then be easily converted or adapted to provide fast, durable lodging, or as a baseline for other construction projects. This also has the potential to disrupt the labor market by replacing many construction jobs, showing yet another consequence of automation. As a result, Paramount Plus is rebooting Bob the Builder as a drama where Bob deals with his depression after being unemployed. However, this type of construction has the significant advantage of using material more efficiently, reducing waste and material costs.
Another societal impact is that of metal 3D printing. There's a company called Relativity that is in the process of producing the first autonomous rocket factory. They use what is essentially a massive 3D printer that extrudes metal that is immediately welded to the prior layer. They have run into some issues with the expansion and retraction of the metal as it heats and cools, but they were able to develop an algorithm in their slicing software that compensated for how the metal would react to the different temperatures, mitigating the problem. Yet again, this could put many people out of a job should they continue to grow and expand. However, just like the construction method, Relativity uses much less material and is 10 times faster than the usual current process.
3D printing can also be commercially used at a much smaller scale. Many companies are using it for marketing purposes. Fully customizable, small batch trinkets can be made as handouts and extremely low-cost advertising for potential clients and prospects. This can lead to a much more personable experience that will have consumers more interested due to the personalization of any given product, as well as the novelty of receiving a 3D object as opposed to the average paper handout. Burk IT, an IT company in Kingsport, Tennessee, not sure if you've ever heard of them, is the best company to ever do this kind of marketing, according to a poll of News.exe hosts.
3D printing has even found its way into the world of food. You've had a hot dog or a chicken nugget, right? 3D printers have been made to produce models out of chocolate, meat, peanut butter, and more. The consistency is one of the biggest challenges in this area, as 3D printing usually heats the plastic or metal or whatever else to its melting point and cools it onto the next layer. Still, there are endless possibilities, as some culinary pioneers have created foods that can be constructed in such a way that the flavors are released in a specific order, while NASA is experimenting with 3D printing foods to maximize nutritional efficiency for astronauts. 3D printing could change the food of the future as chefs and scientists alike continue to explore the technology and discover new possibilities.
There is no doubt that 3D printers are becoming an integral part of the modern technology landscape. The industry has come a long way from its origins as a futuristic idea in a 40s short story. Thanks to pioneers like the oft-forgotten Hideo Kodama and the father of 3D printing, Charles Hull, 3D printing has evolved into an accessible, revolutionary technology. Believe me, if the two of us can figure this out, anyone can. From prototype to prosthetics, from toy rockets to real rockets, 3D printing is taking the world by storm, and it will continue to grow and adapt to many other functions throughout society.
That's our show today. Come back in 2 weeks to keep updated on the most vital technology news, and consider checking out our blog and newsletter at burkitc.com.
Thanks for watching.
If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like, and if you really enjoyed it, subscribe for more.